Hello.
Hi,
Hi, Michael. Good afternoon to you.
good
How are
afternoon
you
to you as
doing?
well. Could be better, but seeing you and everyone online makes me happy, so that's good.
Very good. Very good.
Cool. Is
Welcome,
the audio
everybody.
okay today? Before
Pardon?
we get into it, is the audio okay today? Because I just
No, the audio
recently
is
have
good.
a
Yeah, the
cool.
audio. Yeah,
All
yeah.
good. Super.
So far so good. Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Let us know in chat where you're watching this from, and maybe even when you're watching this from. So what's the time for you? For us here, it's yeah, late afternoon already. So looking forward to chatting with you during the session. We will do. Uh, um, yeah, we will dive into a few things today, and I'm looking forward to that. So I think that's going to be a good session today. Let me let's go right in, I guess, and I'll share my screen quickly and go over what's to come today. So yeah, like I said, discovering Neo4j AuraDB free is the topic. Um, the plan looks as follows. We're gonna do a quick recap of what's Neo4j AuraDB free, and gonna pick a data set. If you have a data set, I think we didn't ask this for a while now. So yeah, exactly. We're gonna put up with that again. So if you have a data set you think is interesting, you'd like us to explore, let us know. Tweet us, write us an email, post a post on the community forums, write on Discord, anywhere, comment under this YouTube video. I mean, you know how to how to find us, right? Um, then once we have picked the data set, we think a little bit about the questions we might ask. So we explored a little bit. We're gonna find out what makes sense, what can be asked in this data set, and what is kind of like the scenario we're gonna go for. Then we determine the data model, because that kind of like goes hand in hand a little bit. So sometimes you find out your questions and you define what kind of data model you go for, and then you develop further, and then you iterate and so on. Then load and query time, obviously getting the data in, and then after we did that, after we loaded the data, we're gonna explore it and see what kind of queries we will ask with it. What is Neo4j AuraDB free? So just quickly, it's the free version of Neo4j AuraDB, which is a graph database as a service in the cloud. You can basically go on the page. I'm going to link it in a second in chat. Go on that, register, log in with your details, and just you're good. You get a data set, a database that's for you, free for you as well. It's limited a little bit to 50,000 nodes and 175,000 relationships, but other than that, it's for yours forever, basically. You have access to Neo4j browser, which is the development tool we have, and you also get Neo4j Bloom, which is our visualization service. So with these two tools at your fingertips, you have all the basic needs you would need to start your own project in the graph world. And with AuraDB free, you can always upgrade. So once the 50,000 nodes and 175,000 relationships are not enough anymore, you can always upgrade to the next tier, which is not going to be free anymore, but still. The link will follow in chat in a second, but let's get going today. So the topic today is going to be Pandora Papers. So we have explored that a little bit. So I think you might have, probably you have seen this before. So this is the Pandora Papers login page, where you can see all the information. The ICAJ posts these and collects these all together. So you might have heard of Paradise Papers or Panama Papers or some other leaks. So the ICAJ is really big with these. And the Pandora Papers was the recent one. Michael, do you remember when was it? I think a month ago or something.
The data, so the official publication of the Pandora Papers was October 3rd.
October, so yeah,
Um,
2 months ago.
and last week, actually, the data publication happened. So that's why we're talking about this today as well.
Exactly.
Because the data has gotten out, or a part of the data. So I looked at data. It's Of course, not all of it anyway, but it's also only like a small portion of the Pandora Papers data as well that they published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they publish this, so you can. I'll also post a link in chat to this, so you can find out yourself. So they have gathered all information. There's a little YouTube video on it where they explain what it is all about, and then they have some other articles. It's going on, so you can see really they post constantly. And here, this is the post that Michael refers to. So the IG released new Pandora Papers data from 2 offshore service providers. So this is that. So I guess really big. And you can search it here yourselves, go in and explore it. But what we're gonna do is we follow this guide that Michael already wrote last week, I guess, on the release of the Pandora Papers data set, where Michael already went in and checked out the data model and so forth. But we are going to do this now together. So we'll dive into that, I guess. So
Yep,
let me
exactly.
quickly get those links out for you. This is the blog post. Maybe I'll start with that. I guess this is the interesting interesting bit. So I posted that in chat. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you, Alex, for the introduction. Really good. So let me share my screen. Just pick the right one. Okay. So what I originally wanted to do is to show you the Pandora Papers in Neo4j Aura. Unfortunately, I started a little bit too late to load the dump file, so it's still loading, so we can check back in later. But until then, let's talk a little bit about data model and the data itself and where you can find it. And then if it's not done by then, we can use Neo4j Desktop, and otherwise we go into Aura. Okay, and I also have another idea that I thought would work, but let's look at this as well. So Alex already pointed out the Pandora Papers page, and if you want to look more into detail, there's this Offshorelinks Database data thing here, which gets us to this page. And there you can search for things in the different Offshorelinks databases, right? So for instance, if I they usually publish these kind of power plays, so like stories or visualizations of things over about like publicly known people. So for instance, we have like Jordan's king in here, Kenya's president, Lebanon, and then there are also the Aliyevs again from Azerbaijan, people from Putin's circle, several of them actually, as you can see here. People from Hong Kong and so on, right? So different people. And so what we could do is basically just pick one of these people, like the former Hong Kong chief executive, and then you can read about the kind of reporting, the actual journalistic reporting of it, but you can also see it as a graph, basically, right? So you see here the person and the companies that they've been working with. So that's something that we can then look at and search for this, right? So if we take this person, and unfortunately we can't copy. Can we copy and paste the text? No, so we probably need to remember that. And Ying Chan Ying. So let's see if I get to try to do this. So here Chan Ying. I hope I didn't misspell this. Chan Ying looks okay. Okay, and if we want to search this, hopefully, let's see. So there's lots of matches, and our person might be in somewhere in there. So I'm not sure if you can say I want to actually match like the exact spelling. Ah, there we are. So there's Offshorelinks and Paradise Papers, actually. Interesting. So if you look at this data, then we see him here as such. What we can also do in the in the search for the Offshorelinks database, for the public database, is you can pre-select one of the data sets, and then it should only show you the things from that data set. So you see there are 17,000 entities, meaning shell companies, 26,000 officers. Also, when I looked at the data, it's actually only 16, 70,000 unique names. So there are lots of duplicates where they didn't merge the data together for data preservation reasons. So basically, they don't want to meddle with the data, so they're not accused for of merging things together. And John Smith here and John Smith there, you don't actually know if just the name is mentioned, if it's actually the same person.
Yeah.
So they have some relationships between nodes where it says same name as, or similar person as, or same company as, or something like that. But they don't really merge them together because you can't really prove that one John Smith mentioned in one text is the same John Smith as mentioned in the other text, right? I mean, if you look at the context, then you often see this, but then you need to do more journalistic research. Where you then look into the shell companies and when were they created by whom and so on. And 16,000 addresses. So, but unfortunately, I thought you could also search in this subset only. Okay, doesn't work. But for that, let's see, it's still loading? So let me just grab quickly my local database. Or let me do something else first. I want to show you. Alex shared the blog post. I think it's in developer blog, right?
Yeah.
Blog. There we go. So in the blog post, we look a little bit at the data model, data in there, and how you can get this information. So basically what we have here is on GitHub, there's a public repository now, which is very similar to our other example data repository that we've looked at in the past, recommendations and so on, with browser guides, the raw data, like the CSV files, and browser guide, and here's also the data in here. So when you basically get any of these dump files, then you can import them into Aura. You need an Aura Pro instance because they're so large, so they don't fit into free, and or in desktop. And until my Aura instance here is done, we can look at the desktop version of that. And then we can start querying and playing around with the data and look at this a little bit. The data model is pretty straightforward. So you see it here. So we could also model it in arrows, but it's pretty straightforward. So you have the entities, which are the shell companies, the officers, which can be a director of a shell company or a shareholder, beneficiary of a shell company, or someone who's somehow involved with that shell company. And then we have intermediaries, which are the banks and law firms and other institutions that offer services to create and manage these kind of shell companies, right? So if you, Alex, want to say, okay, I want to put my earnings from all the live streams on Twitch into a shell company, then you go to a German bank like Deutsche Bank or someone else in Munich and say, I have all these millions of dollars here from my live streams, I want to put them into a shell company. Then you go there and they say, oh yeah, where do you want your shell company? Seychelles or British Virgin Islands.
Tell my secrets public. I mean.
And so actually, it would be interesting if you find some of the live streamers in the data sets. That could be actually an interesting one, because there was this Twitch leak where they published.
Yeah, there was one. Yeah.
So it would be kind of interesting to see if those people can actually be found there. Anyway, so you go to one of these intermediary, or it could be also law firm, and they create a shell company for you, but the real owner of the shell company is usually not visible. It's kind of employees of that law firm or random people that kind of sign, I'm a director of this shell company, but the real person or the real organization that owns the shell company is never published anywhere in any company registry. They have it in their internal documents, of course, and databases. And this is exactly what has been kind of published with these leaks, is basically these internal documents, right? So they're actually the people that are really behind those shell companies. Those are actually become visible, right? And that's kind of the interesting and important thing here, especially if those shell companies then kind of move from one owner to the other, and they basically trade shell companies like you would trade stock or so, right? So you put $1 million into a shell company, and then you basically hand over the shell company to someone else, so the other person suddenly has $1 million at their disposal, basically, as such, right? And then you can, whatever dirty things you want to do, from buying arms to drug purchases to crazy things like buying your yacht or something else, right? So, or buying an island or so, right? So there's a lot of money moving behind the scenes that you can't track and trace. So many state governments and jurisdictions try to find money that has been taken by criminals or corruption. But if it's once in a shell company, it's really, really hard to track. And that's why these leaks are also really important for law enforcement and tax authorities, because they now can figure out who got the money, who put the money where, and other ways of getting back those things through the criminal justice system, right? So that's basically the data model as such, and that's been pretty stable over the years. So they've always used this data model since the early days of Swiss leaks and Panama Papers and so on. So in this current data set, there are not so many entities. So let me see if we are good here now. No. So I'll just show you that I took this database and imported it into Neo4j desktop. So I took the dump file, as you can see here. Let me just pull the browser up here as well. So so I took the dump file, and then if you add, so you can say add local file, and then you can just put dump file into a project in Neo4j desktop, and then with create new DBMS from dump or import dump into an existing DBMS, you can turn this dump file into a database, which I've done already here. And now we can start this database. And it takes a few seconds to start. While it's doing that, you can look at log files and other things as well, right? And so that's how you can use it on your own machine if you have Neo4j desktop installed, or if you're on Aura. Let me just show you. If you're on Aura and you have a database, then you can basically upload, and with import database, you select a dump file and upload it into your instance. Because Aura free is limited in terms of graph size, you need to have an Aura Pro instance for this dump file as such. Okay, so let's see if our desktop database has started. Yes, it's started. So it's now active. And now we can basically open Neo4j browser with this one. Let me clear this out. And then we can start investigating this data, right? So this is the whole Offshorelinks database. So it's not just Pandora Papers. So it's almost 2 million nodes and 3.2 million relationships in here. So it's pretty big. And now we can look at, okay, how many nodes of the different types are in here. So we can just match all the nodes and say return head labels of n as type, count star as count, order by count descending, and then it runs, and we see it's 800,000 shell companies, 745,000 officers, 390,000 addresses, and so on. And if you want to limit this to one of the data sets, then we can just say where n dot source ID starts with Pandora Papers, and then it runs this, and we see basically what I showed you before, these 26,000 officers, 70,000 entities, and 60,000 addresses. But if you look at the officers, actually, let's do this here. We can let me do this here up here. So we can just look at the officers. So which should give us only the 26,000. But what we can also do is we can count distinct n.name as uniques. And then you see it's only 70,000 unique names in that data set. That's what I mentioned before, right? So it's more entities, but with a lot of the same names. So I actually saw this when I was looking for one particular person, and there were like 17 people with that name in the database.
Michael, sorry for interrupting, but I'm getting some scratchy noises. Are you, which microphone are you using?
I should be using the one
in your ears, or the one on your mic, because it sounds like sometimes you would touch like a.
Oh, it could Actually, yeah, I have the airports selected here, but it says in the browser setting that it's using actually Mac. Okay, so I'll keep my hand from that side.
Or you just switch it over. You can always switch.
Yeah, stuff. No, it doesn't allow me to switch. So if I want to switch it in the browser, at least it doesn't allow it. Let me
Doesn't
see
allow.
the
Okay.
settings.
Yeah.
It's better now or different?
Mm,
Let's see how it goes. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So, but if you remember that we were actually looking for a particular officer, right, in the database, and.name. So, and it was changing like this. There was on our here changing. So return n. So and doesn't find it. Probably either some spelling or it's not in the Pandora Papers part of the data. So let's try this. If you only look for this person, it's not in there. Okay, but what we can do actually in here is we can do a full text search on the data. So we can call db.index.fulltext.query nodes. I'm not sure why it's not completing it. So I think the index is called search, and then we can just search for the name such. Yield node, comma score, where node officer, return node limit 10. So you see that now we have different spellings with uppercase here, with spaces and dashes, different spaces and dashes here. So you see that actually on the, in terms of the spelling, it's very different, right? So we can now say, okay, we want to have at least Janine as one word here. So then we get it like this, right? So, and you see that there are lots of entries for the same person, right? And node.source ID starts with Pandora Papers. So I was not really sure if this person was actually in the published dataset. Yeah. So, but it's the wrong people, right? Or at least the names only partially match what you're looking for, right? So it seems he was not in the published dataset. But this shows you already how you can do full text search on the data, which is quite nice, right? So you can do this. There are also different indexes for this. So for instance, if
Is this already using the new text index from 4.4?
So we have the new text index here on this data set. But we also have full text indexes as well. Because the text index, as you can see here, we have a text index here on these, like officer name and so on. So which is better for like contains queries.
Okay.
But it doesn't allow for case insensitive and partial matches and like fuzzy matching and so on. So that's why we also created like full text indexes here for everything.
I see.
But also full text indexes per individual entity as well. So we also have, for instance, I can also do a full text search on officer only, and then we don't need to check for the type here. Then it only has officers in this one, for instance. And so we have more of that. But it's unfortunately not our candidate, right? So unfortunately, he's not in there. So what we can do is we can look at one of the other Power players and see what else we can find in there. I think, let's see, what do we want to look at? Panama presidents. There are so many. I think there are 56 or 64 now Power players. So there's a lot of people. So for instance, if you try to look for the person here,
Then we can see if we find that person in our data. Let's see. So these are people from that data set. And if I do this in double quotes, it should actually find it, and then it can't find it. Okay, so then I guess, so one thing that you can do, it's family of the Azerbaijani president is always in there because they have so many shell companies and things like that. So there are tons of Pandora Papers things. And here you see even the same name as relationship as well, as such, right? So there's these things as well. And so you can see what they're doing, and then you can find their involvements. So if you want to look at this, like at the Alia family, we can just say we want to find officers who have an involvement with an entity. Where o.name contains. So this is now using the new text index, by the way, and o.source ID starts with Pandora, return everything. So here now we see already from the Pandora Papers, the Alia family, what they're investing in, and also kind of what else is the overlap between those, right? So, but you see that basically for all the different shell companies, the same person has a different name here, right? So it's basically only transitively investing with the other. Transitively, this one person is involved with all these shell companies, right? So, but there's an instance for the name for all of these here as such. Right. So, and then you can start investigating this. What is also part of this publication is a browser guide. So if I do play Offshore Leaks, I think it's CIJ, Offshore Leaks. Then I get a browser guide for the whole database, basically. So it explains kind of the data set, the data model, allows some queries and so on. But then at the end, you have for each of those data sets, you have individual browser guides as such. So this one is Pandora Papers with the video that you've already seen, and then you can start exploring this. And for instance, here's a query that shows in shortest path between two people that are in the Pandora Papers. So just to show you how you could kind of follow the money or something like that, right? So they say, okay, I have two suspects in some way, and I want to see how are these two connected, through which shell companies are they connected, through which intermediaries are they connected. And you see that, for instance, here, all these shell companies share the same address that's on the British Virgin Islands, right? So, I mean, that might be a low incidence or coordination, but you can also imagine others where they actually jointly invested into shell companies and things like that as such. Right. So if you want to exclude this, then you would remove the registered address here, and then you would have to find other ways of connecting these people. So in this case, these two people are not connected then anymore if you remove the address from that picture. Okay. And then you can do other questions as well. So you can say, for instance, I want to see, so this is one of the published intermediaries from the Pandora Papers, and we want to see how many shell companies in the different countries did they actually create, right? So if I run this, then I see, oops, why? Oh, because it's, I think, e.country code, countries as well. Country, that's weird. So let me see what's wrong here. So we can just return the entity. And oh, they don't actually have country codes in here. That's unfortunate. So this seems to be like a difference to the other data models that we used to have before in the offshore leaks. So they don't have country codes, only entities.
Oh, okay.
What we could do is you could look at the addresses for these entities and see if the addresses have country codes, and then use those instead. They don't have addresses. That's really sad. So that seems to be weird. Why do these entities not have addresses? But we've already also seen that in the beginning, so there were not as many addresses in the data as well. So let's pick another intermediary. So if I look at the offshore leaks, at the Pandora Papers again, they actually talk about some of the intermediaries. There was one here, Cordero, Panamanian law firm. So we can look for those if we find these. Let's try this. Cordero, no. Let's look at the full text index, db.index full text query nodes, and then intermediary, and then Cordero. And then we can pass in a limit directly here, limit 10. Okay, so it's spelled differently. So it's Cordero with an uppercase. Aleman Cordero. So okay, it needs to be all caps. Okay, Cordero. So that's the disadvantage of these direct matches. What was this? By the way, if you want to, you can also copy and paste directly from here. But actually,
is that new, or was it?
That's new. So that's a new feature in browser, that the property view is actually moved to the side from the bottom, and now you have a better overview of all the properties. You can copy them all in once up here, or you can copy them individually as well, which is quite nice.
That is nice indeed.
So Cordero, not Condero, but Cordero. So I just misspelled it. Oh, no, that's weird. But it seems that the entities don't have so many addresses here. That's interesting. So perhaps the addresses are only for officers then, as such.
Maybe the Pandora Papers, yeah.
So it's probably only a partial. Let's see if we get the officers, and they have addresses. Because I really want to see this by jurisdiction. So because it's always interesting to see. So addresses don't seem to be so as much in here. So as I said before, this is also something where the volume of the data leak can also be. Oh, this was also the wrong direction of the arrow. I just realized, because the officer is involved in a company, and then and then the address is here. Let's try this again. I just pointed the arrow in the wrong direction. Come on. So we should actually switch to the graph view. Now it looks better. Right. So now we have the red ones are addresses, the orange ones are officers, and the blue one are the companies. And if we click on one of these addresses, then we see that they have now countries and country codes. So we need to go all the way through the address of the because the officers also don't have any country information. Right. So, oh no, they have actually countries here on the officer. Okay, so we can use this. Don't need to go all the way to the addresses. So we would say countries. So we return officer.countries, comma, count star as frequency, order by frequency descending limit 20 or something like that. right? So we see kind of this law firm has everyone in Panama.
Because it,
Right.
yeah, makes sense. It's based in Panama.
Panamanian law firm.
Yeah.
But then you can also see are there certain intermediaries or law firms that have more than one country.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually something when we say, okay, we just want to look at Pandora Papers and say with intermediary, comma, we just take each intermediary, collect all the countries that they have distinct as countries, where countries is greater than one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Return intermediary, comma, countries.
Yeah,
Order
misspelled
by,
return.
oh, thank you. Order by, this is actually size of countries. Size of countries descending. So we get all the intermediaries in Pandora Papers with the number of countries that they have. So you see Cordero, this one actually, which is SFM. Oh, that was the one from the beginning, SFM Corporate Services, and this one has, as you can see, a ton of different countries in here, right? So, I mean, there are different combinations, of course, as well, right? But it's a lot of different countries, right?
Yeah,
so
much
it was
more than the
basically
other one.
just missing the country field on the entity, so we can fix this in the guide as well. So if you go all the way back to our original thing, then we can actually say this was just missing the officer, and then we use o.countries here, countries, and then this should give us better understanding of how many countries this intermediary was active in, right? So actually, these semicolon separated things we can also sort out by saying unwind split o.countries, comma, semicolon is country, and then we can just say use this. So it takes the string, splits it by the semicolon, and then takes each of them individually as one country. So you see that UK jumped from 52 to 111 as such, but we don't have any duplicate things in here anymore. And so that's a nice one that we should probably add to the guide. Let me take a note of that. Don't forget about it. Okay, and so basically you can explore the guide. You can connect it to the stories from the offshore leaks and try this yourself. So you can also look at the visualization of the data, the volume of data that's in here. And then you have also things like find me certain officers. So here, for instance, is a Russian person who showed up in one of the stories. And then you can see, okay, this person showed up here, and then you can expand this person and then see where were they involved and things like that. Right? So, and then you can do also like second degree and third degree. So basically you can say, okay, I have this this person and want to see are there any second degree things. And this is second degree because it basically goes from this person to another person and back again. So it's like 1, 2, 3 from that perspective. Or it goes from officer to entity to another officer to back to another entity, basically as such. Okay, what else do we have in the guide? So we can also do the same for intermediaries. And then, or for entities, so we can, for instance, say who's behind a certain entity, who are the officers behind this entity, and then we can see, okay, this this offshore company has a lot of people involved with it, right? So, and then you can kind of start investigating these people and seeing what else have they done, where else have they investigated as well. So, for instance, I could say, okay, these officers in which other entities have they also been involved, right? And then you just say return all this, and then you get like the second degree. But for those, obviously, or not obviously, but for those, it's actually not been visible that you have other entities in this data set as such. Okay, and then it points back to the original slide. The challenge here is really that the published data is really small, and then so many of the stories that they published is actually they are only partially in the data and not fully in the data, which is a little bit unfortunate from that perspective.
Okay, so it's but it gives it's more like an insight in a from a shorter set, but at the same time these other databases are available, so Paradise and Panama Papers
and
so
Bahamas, all of them are in there. Actually, that's a good point. It's something that we can also see here, where we say, when we say find me all the source IDs, so kind of which investigations and how much data from each investigation is in here. All right, so that's the other thing that you can do. Where we see, okay, if you look at all the information, so there's 55,000 nodes from Panama Papers, then Paradise Papers, Offshore Leaks, Bahamas Leaks, and then they also have a subset of like Paradise Papers, Appleby, and so you could even say you split this by.
They split this basically by
source, by intermediary,
country / law firm,
Yeah, that's because they said because the source ID points to the leak or the data set of documents from which set of documents basically is the source ID. So the documents from Appleby are different documents than those from Nevis, for instance, also, right? So and that's why in the source ID you have this this whole source basically. But if you split it by space and only take the first name, then we can aggregate them into one. As such, let's do this. So you see Paradise Papers, we have 867,000, then Panama, then Offshore Leaks, Bahamas Leaks, and Pandora Papers is only a small one. But there's a larger data dump coming at a later point as well. So where more data will be made available as well. The other thing that I wanted to quickly show you is you can also download the CSV files for those. And what I actually wanted to do, but then I realized something interesting. So these are all the CSV files for from the Offshorelinks database. So you see they have 3.2 million relationships, as we've seen in the node and in the graph, and then addresses, entities, intermediaries, and officers, and some other things. So what I thought we can do is we can just subfilter them by, so for instance, if I look at the addresses, you see that there's also the source ID in here. And I thought, because in total it's too large, but the small data set could, the Panama Papers data set, Pandora Papers data set could almost fit into Aura3. So I thought that we can just subfilter it by source ID.
Okay.
So if you do, where's this here? If I take node addresses and use AccessV, which is a really nice CSV tool written in Rust, you do search, so you can provide a regular expression here for this field, and then look at how much data it returns. Then we only get 16,000 rows out of 300, right? So it subselects this, which is really nice. So I thought, okay, we can just do this and input those. So I just wrote a little one line, this one, that takes all of the CSV files and filters for source ID Pandora and puts it into a separate folder. So if I do this, it almost worked. So I was quite happy, but unfortunately, the relationships, only one relationship, which is only the header, is too little, and it looks as if the published relationships file is actually missing the Pandora paper. So we need to go back to them and ask them to update this. And
Okay.
so there's also CSV stats that you can run on a file, which is also quite nice. And then you can say it looks at the file, and then you get it like a statistics of it. So you see what are like the entries in here, and or you can also do CSV select source value. Oops. Relationships. Yeah, and then you can pipe this to a sort and unique C, and you what? Oh, could have had. And then we see there's actually no Pandora papers in here in the relationships. So we need to
Okay,
we need to
there's
go back and ask them.
yeah.
You see, there's like a data missing. Otherwise, I would have kind of tried to import the data also as the float CSV from this subset into Aura3 as another option. But that's something that I just saw a minute before we started, so I didn't have time to go into that.
Okay. But well, maybe we get that at some other point in time,
Yeah,
and then we can have a look at it.
exactly.
But if it's
So
missing, that's that
yeah, exactly.
makes it
The other thing,
difficult.
yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing that I want to show is really quick is that there's also these code examples here. So you have for Java, JavaScript, Python, and so on, the code examples on how to connect to Neo4j and use that database as well. So if I want to connect to my Aura instance, then I can just basically pick one of these examples. For instance, if I want to do a Python notebook with a bunch of charts and investigations here, then I can just take this code and run this code against my instance as such. So for instance, if I take this and just say pip install Neo4j, and then vi test.python, we paste this in here, and then we just change this to our local database, and our username is Neo4j, and our password is very secret test. And then if I run this test script, then it returns me the data from this query in here. So find me the officer, Ross Wilbur, and the addresses, intermediaries, and other officers that are connected to this person, 10 hops away, and first 20, then I get this query executed. So that's simple and quick to run something like this. And we can also change this to one of our other queries, and then and so all the code examples are also in here for the different languages. So you want to build a React app or something with the GraphQL API or Java app or whatever, then you get all the code examples also in this repository as well, which is nice. And then the other thing, if you want to show this kind of data to someone who has not so much development experience, then something that I recommend is to use Bloom on top of the data, because that's really nice for someone who has no query language experience and just wants to explore this data interactively and visually. Then you can, then you can explore this. So you can basically nicely format this stuff, and then you can say, for instance, I want to have an intermediary Pandora, right? Was it like this? Name.
I think it was Cordero, Michael.
Cordero, name Cordero.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, so what you can do is basically you can say I want to see an intermediary. But what we can do is actually source ID.
Cordero, it was Cordero.
Pandora.
Must have been Cordero. Yeah.
Papers. All right, so you can just say intermediary with source ID Pandora Papers, and then I want to see other entities basically from that intermediary, and then if I hit return, it will do this query, and I get all this data nicely in my Bloom, and then I can basically start investigating here, right? So I can, for instance, sub-select data and say, okay, I'm interested in these three, and say dismiss all the other nodes, and then I get all these three left, and then I say expand all relationships here from those, and then you see already, oh, these three are actually related, not just via the intermediary, but also with other things as well. Right? So and then you can say, okay, I want to find, for instance, I want to see, is there a shortest path between these two officers? Then you can do this, and the shortest path is already this one that we see here, right? And then you can also say this officer, what else does it have? And then, okay, they have this other person who is the same, and then we can actually go from this person as well. And then, oh, this is interesting. Why does this person now have so many other personalities, to say so, right? So it's all the same name as a thing, right? So we can select all of these and then expand them again, and then we see, can we find paths between those also, right? So they all share also one address, and so on. So you can basically do these very interactive explorations on the data as such, right? And then you can say, okay, this address seems to be really important. I just dismiss all the other nodes, and then I would say expand this. Oh, this has only a registered address. Okay, I want to see if there's an entity related to this node. But as you've seen before, the entities don't have addresses in this current data set for Pandora Papers. But Bloom is really nice because then you can do these kind of investigations, and then you can export your kind of go to presentation mode, and then you can also export your data as screenshots, for instance, right? So if you want to do like an article or presentation about something, you can say, okay, I want to do this, and then I want to export this as a screenshot. So I would kind of get this exported, and then I can see this as my one second to open it. Should have opened it on another screen, but I'm not sure where it went. Anyway, you can imagine.
Yeah, it's basically a JPEG or a PNG file, and then you can
exactly right. And that's really nice because then you can basically really use this for these kinds of visual investigations, also for people that don't have development experience. And in Aura as well, you can open the databases with Bloom as well, right? So if I open this database with Bloom, which is now empty because you haven't imported anything, then you can explore this as well.
Yeah, that's always the option, and it comes with every AuraDB instance. Even with the free one, you always have Bloom alongside it, so you can always go and explore there. So that's really handy, like you said. I mean, it's very good if you have no coding experience. It's very visual, and it's very easy to get going just by typing in words basically in the search bar, and then you find the way around the data set.
Exactly. Cool. And I think this covers all the things that I wanted to show. What's kind of interesting is really to look at these in different stories and investigations and see, can we actually find the data for these investigations in our, or for these stories in our data sets, right? So for instance, one thing I did in the article, there was another set of, where was this? There was another page here, which I don't remember. What was it called? They have these other investigations on top of that. So you basically see, this is one about property ownership, right? So where basically people from the Pandora Papers investigation are involved in some property ownership, like Aliyev's in London, and then in different countries that people were involved in kind of weird ownership schemes of even a German nursing home in Berlin. Alex is in here that's involved in, and then you can basically search for these people basically in the data set and see if they if you find them in here, right? So for instance, I don't know, let me see. Window browser, call DB index politics query nodes, and if you search for in the officer index for this Boris Levine, limit 20. Then we see, this is from here's one entry, for instance, from Pandora Papers. But you see, it's a different spelling, so it's kind of probably not in there. But you can kind of use this to look at some of the stories here, right? And all the names are in capital or bolded letters here, so you can basically look at these as well. And so that's something that you can also explore as such.
Yeah, and
so
this
there's
is
a number
again,
of
I
these
mean,
investigative.
this is not the full release of
Yeah,
the data set that's
exactly.
kept with the ICIJ, obviously, because this is really sensitive data, and they
Yeah,
don't wanna publicly make this available. That's not the point
yeah,
of this leak. So that's why sometimes you will find nothing, but this is not because it's not there, it's not made up, it's really there, but it's not available for you and me to access it. So you cannot
exactly. Yeah,
go in there and look for your neighbors.
yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the data is also in government in DocCloud. So some of the data is actually published where it's kind of redacted, as you can see. A
Yeah.
lot of black chunks in here, right? So, but they did already all the work of extracting this information from the documents and turn it into a machine readable database format, so they can use it for their investigations as well. Right? So that's really interesting from that perspective.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of content here. I mean, there's 200 journalists who worked on this, so there are more stories in there than a single person could kind of look at. But if there are certain things that are interesting for your country or for whatever you're interested in, then that's something really that you now can start investigating with this data, which is really nice.
Yeah, I can always read up on it in your local newspapers or in any other global ones. So that's really interesting one. And it's always constantly growing and adding new things to it. So I wouldn't be surprised if there would be another leak coming around. But also, like you said, Michael, if some of the data sets are missing or relationships missing, so maybe we get a re-roll of that. And then they make it available, and then we can update the guide a little bit. But you know, like we showed today here, you can play the browser guide in Neo4j, and you can go in and explore the data set from there. And that's already a pretty good start, I think.
Yeah.
If you want to go into that and explore it further, and it's really amazing what they're doing and how much they found out and how much they make these how much these connections come to the fore, and where they really see, oh, actually this is, like I said, we had this here. I mean, these people we picked were more or less random. So I mean, we found this one guy that has, like, I don't know, 50 aliases,
50 investigations or 50 investments or or names, right? Or here, or if you here look at the Aliyev family, they have so many things that they found in this for this Azerbaijani ruler's wife and children and himself as well, right? So, and basically there's a lot of data in there, and if you're involved into something like looking at these countries and so, then that would be really interesting for folks to have a look at as such.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. There was one thing that I wanted to mention. Oh, yeah. The really important aspect about this data is really that the journalists use this kind of data only as starting points for their investigation. So they don't take the data and do the story, but they take the data, get information out of it, and then they start to investigate with their usual journalistic tools, doing interviews, doing research, doing verification and confirmation of what they found there, right? So they don't publish only based on the data from the leak, but they always corroborate the information from other sources as well. That's why it's journalists and not just people like us who kind of just dip into the data and
Yeah.
are looking at what you're finding, because they have all the journalistic tools also at hand that they can use as well. Right. Cool. So
Cool.
that I think covered what we wanted to cover today. And yeah.
That was super cool. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for that insight and for that run through the Pandora Papers data set. I think that was really good. We'll be back tomorrow actually with another special stream. You can already subscribe to that or get your reminder in YouTube. So that's when we have Nathan Smith, or I will have Nathan Smith with me to talk about, or he will basically talk about how to create a similarity graph from node properties with Neo4j. So I think that's going to be an interesting session tomorrow. Like I said, get a reminder set up in YouTube already, and then we'll be back, Michael and I, next week on Monday in the morning session. So that's going to happen over the next few days. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for participating and for a nice chat today. And yeah, take care, everybody, and see you around.
Yeah, see you next time.